Welcome back to another episode of Discovering Disruptions in Tech. This week, we're here with Chris Hurd, the CEO at Olive, and we're going to talk about how platforms enable you to minimize bureaucracy and improve democratization within your organizations. We're going to talk about some specific platforms. So, let's get into it. Let's do some thought leadership and have a fun conversation. Chris, what do you think?
It sounds fun. Let's see if it pans out as fun.
Is it going to be as fun as our discussion 2 minutes ago about British television shows?
We'll get to British television shows at some point later on. So yeah, I think so.
It's true. It's true. I'm looking forward to talking about Greg Davies a little bit. He's probably my favorite current British persona. Anyhow, so you and I've known each other for a little while now, right? We've kind of gone back and forth and had some really good discussions. And I think there's a topic that doesn't get as much attention as I'd like. I got started in this in the world we're going to dig into here in let's say 1991, doing responses to RFPs from state and local government, specifically education. And holy crap, did that suck. Right? Like it's a black box both directions. And what you tend to see, especially from government, is, oh, look, you can tell on this one, they hired a consultant. Right? Because it's written with language that's very pointed towards a solution they already had in mind. As I kind of grew up and evolved in the industry, I joined larger and larger and larger organizations. And I was in charge of writing RFPs or contributing to RFPs. And again, it was a bit of a black box. And it was a bit of a black box of mistakes entirely too frequently, or a black box of not having the right people in the room, or a black box of having too many of the wrong people in the room, right? Or loud people in the room. Does this all sound familiar to you?
Yeah, of course. RFPs. I mean, we started off saying this is going to be fun, and then we went and talked about RFPs. So I promise it can be
the word RFP and disconnected.
It can be interesting. Yeah, Mo was on the other side responding for most part, and I never intended to get into helping with RFPs, but yeah, I mean, it's as soon as we got involved with them, you realize that half the time people are just copy and pasting someone else's RFP, changing a couple of things and sending it out. Like the consultant ones, you can tell.
Sure.
What's even worse is when you see one that's got completely irrelevant questions and you send it back and they go, oh, yeah, I just copy and pasted that from something else. Then what's the purpose of doing the due diligence? If really it's just copy pasting, it kind of defeats the purpose. So there's just so many things wrong with it. And I just don't think anybody likes them, which is probably why people skip steps and don't do it very well, because
I don't know if I should feel personally attacked at this phase of the conversation or not. Because I am thinking back to there's been more than one time where, like, I'd already done the due diligence, I'd already made a selection, I'd already gone through all the work, and then somebody said, "Hey, we need to, I want you to release an RFP for this." Great. I guess I'm going to start by copy and pasting other people's RFPs because we don't have a library, right? Like we all build a library over time, and eventually for that organization, I built a library. But when you start, you don't have a library. So what do you what do you do to kind of get over that fear of, I don't want to miss a big thing and look like an idiot. I don't want this to look like the first RFP that my company has put out. I don't want this to look like the first RFP I've ever written from scratch. Like there's a bunch of that kind of imposter syndrome bits that also, I think, play into some of our hatred for RFPs. And it's a bureaucratic process too, right? So very few people really seem to enjoy bureaucratic process, and I am certainly not one of those people.
Me neither. Yeah, it's difficult. And by the way, there's a new version of copy and paste, which is ask ChatGPT to write an RFP for you, which is the modern copy paste.
Sure.
But it's kind of the same thing. I think there was a question in there around what can people do to sort of cold start. And definitely there's research and there are templates. I think starting from a template is good. You've just got to make sure it's not massive. The problem with copy pasting an entire RFP is there's going to be a lot of stuff in there that's not relevant. Taking small pieces of it that are relevant first, And starting with that and then building on that base is what to do. Unfortunately, they do take work. Due diligence takes work. It doesn't matter whether you're doing due diligence on an investment, due diligence on a company, due diligence on whatever it is, a software selection. It takes time, and nobody really wants to do it, because ultimately, if you think about software RFP, we're doing this because we want to innovate. We're doing this because we want to do something. We want to change in the business, and this new technology can potentially give us a huge leg up, or fix fill a gap. And so the idea of waiting 6 months just to pick which one we want to go with and then implement it just doesn't jive with innovation in general. But the problem is, and this stat comes out from everybody, a lot of people push this one out, which is 70% of IT implementations fail. You pick a consulting firm, they've launched that, and over the course of the last 10 years, they do fail. And a lot of the reasons they fail is because people don't do due diligence. So it's really a tough one, because on one hand, do I take forever and maybe miss a potential opportunity because I'm taking too long and doing too much due diligence? Or do I skip it? And in actual fact, if you get it wrong, you're way further behind, because the amount of time it takes to clean that up and make that decision right after the fact is much worse. So it is a rock and a hard place, but there are plenty of companies now and plenty of platforms that can help make it more efficient, for sure. And we'll probably get into it later.
So I love that statistic because I hear it all the time. And I will say it's one of my favorite things to challenge somebody with when they bring it up, because they don't bring it up as, here's a statistic that I have nothing to do with. They tend to bring it up as 70% of IT projects fail, which is why you should hire us.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So of the projects that you do, you're telling me 100% of them are successful? You don't help those, like, you're not responsible for any of those 70%? Like you're just using a statistic as a weapon? I don't understand why you brought that particular, you know what I mean? Like, when a consulting
100%.
firm brings it up, I'm like, you guys are massive. Like you're huge. You're Accenture or Booz Hamilton or EY. Like, you are massive. So 70% of your projects fail too. Maybe it's 50%. It's 40%. It's not zero.
Well,
so what are you trying to tell me?
What's more ironic about it is that people that do the research to bring that statistic out are often the people who are asking to be trusted with the selection in the first place. That's the most ridiculous irony about it, is like 70% of IT implementations fail, and we're the biggest name in telling you which one to go with.
Correct. And we're the biggest name in doing it too, right?
Yeah.
So at some point, like, the statistic has to be working against you once you scratch through the surface of the scary statistic. It has to be working against the very people presenting it.
Well, I think that's what this conversation is about today, Howard, right? We wanted to find a topic that was interesting, but it was about RFPs. But I think scratching behind the surface is really the most important thing. And that's whether you're writing RFPs or you're in demos with salespeople, whatever. That's just a habit that you have to get into. And I think there's a lot of fatigue, right? If you're doing a massive selection, it's just, you can't be that bothered to dig that much. So then you're like, okay, that's an interesting statistic. I can probably put it on a deck and get my board to be happy with it.
Sure.
So, that's, I think
it is exhaustion at work, right? And that's kind of how we get into both the 70% fail and the kind of RFP problems, right? At some point, you just go, this thing's getting out of control. We're not actually making decisions. We're just having meetings, right? Like, this has now just become, I'm just going to go with what I have. I've got to get work done. I'm just going to go with what I have. And then at some point, you also, like, you send the RFP out and then you go, oh crap. It just occurred to me that because of the way this worked and because of what I just did, this isn't actually going to be successful.
Or I forgot. And I forgot 10 things. I mean, this is one of the biggest problems.
Well, that's what I mean, right? Like you send it out, you go, oh crap, I forgot all these things. It's not going to be successful. Oh crap, I forgot. I didn't even involve this business unit. It's not going to be successful, right? Like,
it's the problem, I think, is the one-time document. Like, the traditional way to do an RFP, it's one document. It's a thing that you create, but it really isn't a thing. It's a process and a bunch of questions. And that's the issue I think we have with the mindset of, if I write an RFP, put it out, that's it. Because you get the responses from vendors, they'll get a demo and things change. And I do believe if you can find a way to include the suppliers earlier on in the RFP process without them trying to write the RFP for you, which is a job in itself as a software provider. Apologies if there's any background noise there with there's a helicopter going past. Awesome. The issue with having that one-time document is that you're not able to intake any of the learnings you have along the process. Vendors will try and sway you, and they will tell you the differentiators that they know they're going to win on. But within those sales pitches are incredibly important pieces of information and questions you should be asking the other vendors. Then you want to make sure the other vendors get them a chance to get their questions, and you go back. And it's this back and forth is when you really learn truly where the best fit is for you. But because of the fact that we build a document and that's the document, it doesn't allow for this sort of back and forth and agile process to coming up with this decision.
So funnily enough, not the rigid document, but the agile document is how we build reports as analysts, right? I can't build the final criteria before I talk to the first vendor. I can build the framework. I can have a bunch of ideas. I can have some beliefs, right? But I can't actually have a final document before I talk to the first vendor. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right. It always reminds me of, kind of the military adage, right? The best plan survives until the first encounter with the enemy.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right.
I like it.
And it's kind of the same thing, right? Until you see what the boots on the ground are doing, it's just an idea. And RFPs are kind of stuck in that, right? I have to build this whole thing without getting a response from someone that actually sells this every day. And the second I see the first demo, I'm going to go, oh crap, we could really use that feature that I didn't put in there.
100%. I like the military. Right? I always say it's like a surf lesson. You ever had a surf lesson?
Yes. And
they start you on the beach. Who learns anything on that beach bit? I've learned nothing. And then you get in the water, it's completely different.
Right.
Like, it's a completely different idea. So that is interesting. You need to speak to them. But the problem with it is, Howard, and this is something we're taught as salespeople, is if there's an RFP, be the first one in, be the first vendor in, so you can control the RFP and write it. And that, I think, is the fear from buyers, is if I invite the vendors in, they're going to sway me and they're going to bias the decision. So I can't do that. I cannot have them biasing my decision. And so that's why you need to find a way to engage and learn from the people who know without having them bias the ultimate decision, which is where I think software can come in and help.
Well, and I think, to go back to the earliest thing we said, one of the advantages to copy paste is someone's already done some due diligence there. Someone has already done some work, right? And so what I think we were looking for in the copy paste, in addition to all the imposter syndrome stuff, was without having to invite a vendor in, can I leverage some of the lessons that maybe they learned? Can I then tweak that and tune that for me? Right. So we're looking for this sense of community participation, right? 100%. Outside of our organization, right? Community participation. Can I stand on the shoulders of people that have come before? And so much of what we do in IT, in technology, in our organization comes from the lessons we've learned from others and the community that's around us. I don't know when the last time was I created my own Excel formula before going to one of the communities and going, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Has anybody done this before?
I don't know if that's one of the reasons, but IT conferences have always been some of the biggest conferences. And like tech conferences and IT conferences are some of the most attended too. And it speaks to this fact that the community is so important. It really does. And there's no industry where analysts and consultants have such an important role to play as well. For the exactly the same thing.
Automotive is probably, automotive might actually be bigger. Like the analyst community, the influencer community in automotive might be bigger, but I get your point, right? They don't have conferences nearly as big as us. The only conferences that I know that are bigger are gaming.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like Comic-Con. I want to say San Diego Comic-Con. I don't know if you've ever been. It's insane. If you get the opportunity to go, you don't even need a ticket because they take over the Horton Plaza area of San Diego. And a lot of that stuff you can just walk into.
I got to go at one point. I went to we have a Vancouver Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Which is
run by Fan Expo. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And it's awesome. I love it.
Denver's the fourth biggest con now for Comic-Con kind of thing. Denver, I think, is fourth. Vancouver, I don't think Vancouver's in the top 10.
Oh no, it's Canada. Yeah. It's fair. They meet William Shatner there once. He signed a olive. We got a signed picture of William Shatner in the office.
That's awesome.
in
That's
Vancouver.
awesome. I mean, Shatner goes to every Comic-Con. If Olive ran its own Comic-Con and sent an email to Shatner, I think Shatner would show up.
I just heard his music for the first time, by the way. My brother-in-law sent me William Shatner's music.
I love his girl from Ipanema.
Okay, that sounds classic. I don't know if I've got that one. Maybe I have.
Look it up. So I didn't like Shatner. I don't I never liked Shatner. I always found him to be wickedly arrogant and kind of dickish. And he wasn't like he had the arrogance of a Pacino without having the talent of a Pacino kind of thing.
You know, you're speaking to a Canadian, right?
Yeah. Well, wait, because it gets better.
I feel personally attacked.
That's fine. That's fine. I then read a Maxim article that he did, and the picture was him like doing the thinker pose,
right?
And he had his pinky extended, and it had green nail polish on it. And it was the only reason I stopped to read the article. And I read the whole article, and I went, "Oh my God, this guy got hired for a TV show that everybody thought would be canceled in the first day, became a huge like cultural success, Star Trek, obviously, and then has been riding the wave of insanity." And he himself pointed out that this is all a game. His whole persona and everything was something that he created years ago to deal with the fact that this is crazy and insane. And he's just been writing it, waiting for someone to tell him, you just can't do that. Right. And so he's been playing a trick on the whole industry for, it's got to be 50 years now. Right.
But to say that he's talented enough at branding himself then. Let's say that. He doesn't have the Pacino acting talent.
No. Without a doubt. But it gave me a whole new appreciation for the guy reading that article. And this was like late 90s, early 2000s, something like that. And it gave me a whole new appreciation. I went, oh my God, this is a guy that's playing a long, hilarious game. And he only cares if he's the only person that laughs. And I immediately changed my whole tune on Shatner.
I love it. I think I was worried where you were going with it. But firstly, my wife's from Detroit. I didn't even know the automotive industry was bigger than, so already I'm down. Family's Canadian. I'd like double down on points. You're going to.
We were about to end this podcast early.
Yeah, gotta go. But the Shatner, I think so. He is definitely dickish, and he definitely comes across as really arrogant. I wonder how much I've thought about this. I wonder how much was him in Kirk, and how much Kirk made him. Like, if that was his first real major role,
it was. Yeah.
That is him, really. Like, when you think about it, I wonder if he was always that, and that's why Kirk was like that, or if Kirk actually has some influence on him becoming. Canadians aren't known for being dicks.
No, I think Kirk influenced him. Like, I'm trying to remember. It's been 25 years since I read the article, right? But trying to remember the article, I think Kirk influenced him, and there was this expectation that he was Kirk. It was the first big thing. It was the first thing he really did. Everybody knew him, and again, cultural phenomenon, right? This was a show that was so poorly supported, the cast would bring crap from home to use as props.
Brilliant.
Right? So it's why sometimes you'll see something, you're like, is that an egg beater? And yes, it's because it's an egg beater.
Yeah.
Right? Is that a toaster? Yes. Is that the dial from a stove? It absolutely is. Right? Because they had no budget and everybody expected it to be canceled, and it exploded. Right? And so, yeah, I think a big piece of it is people expected him to be Kirk, so he kind of acted like Kirk until he became Kirk, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So his music is a big piece of that. His music, like, he fully acknowledges his music is terrible.
Sure.
But that's what makes it fun.
It's hard not to admit that, I think, to be honest with you. You know what? Star Trek's so good at
Nimoy, though.
Say again? Oh, Nimoy.
Nimoy. Yeah. Oh, my God.
Nimoy's bad. Well, Nimoy, at least, like, I don't know if Nimoy is tongue-in-cheek, maybe. But Shatner's clearly tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
So you can enjoy it for that.
Yeah.
I wonder if, in the future, just a thought, you were just showing me an old iPod, and, like, vintage tech is cool. Maybe because Star Trek gets so much right, the automatic doors, the iPads. I wonder if actually, egg beaters and stove controls may become like vintage tech that's used like way in the future. That's going to be vintage. Maybe they'll predict that too.
That would be hilarious. Like, you have a stove that's all touch, and you have this
Yeah.
like magnetic knob that you can stick on it that actually works, right? Like somebody
Yeah.
produces a Bluetooth or near field wireless knob that people start
So
using.
good. Dolce & Gabbana version of it. Is it like a D&G, a Louis Vuitton
Right.
stove control?
Right.
Fantastic.
Dolce and Gabbana. I like that. I like the idea of that.
We'll think about it. I'll
Right.
contact.
Oh, it'd be gorgeous. That bright blue Tiffany blue. It'd be stunning.
Yeah.
It'd be amazing.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. Stove Jordans. Who knows?
Stove Jordans. Oh, that's incredible. All right. So back on topic, right? So I don't want to dig too much into product, but this is where platforms I think can help, right? So back to kind of the RFP process, like that, it just becomes bureaucratic. It becomes a whole bunch of people in a room trying to make sure everybody kind of gets heard. The loudest voice gets heard the most. Sometimes decisions don't happen after 2 or 3 hour workshops, and you just end up getting frustrated moving forward. So the advantage to platforms is their ability to democratize voices, right?
I think there's a lot of benefits to them. It's an interesting area, actually.
Well, a benefit, yes.
A benefit, yeah. I think as a whole, procurement software in general, the RFP process and the sourcing piece has actually been left out of a lot of product roadmaps. So if you think of the biggest procurement platforms, without naming any names, they've invested a lot in the contract management side of things and the actual purchasing. The decision process has been left generally until kind of now, kind of the last couple of years, really, where they've started to dig in and figure it out. And a lot of startups are getting funded, and a lot of larger platforms are building their own or acquiring them. I think that's because consultants have always been able to do it, or there's been an answer, right? Like there's been an answer to get that piece done, where it's getting done. Okay, it's slow. Nobody wants to do it. It often ends in failure. It's expensive, but we can do it at least. I actually had a conversation with the CIO who said that we were talking about budget and how much budget they have for software. What's your budget for software? Okay, it's this. This is how much we can spend on software. I said, what about, it's being done by consultants today, right? So the budget would come out of the consulting budget for this piece of software. So what's the consulting budget? And they said, well, it's infinite. I mean, it grows. So we kind of just spend, we know how much we're spending, so we just keep spending. And the consulting budget is so big because it changes. And that's what I think has been one of the things that held it back, but it's changed. The last couple of years, we do see a lot of larger platforms investing in making the RFP process and sourcing in general a lot more automated, because it's not just about one big thing morally is bias. Like we want bias and we want everyone to be included. We want the company to be included. We want everyone to feel part of the decision. And ultimately that's going to drive user adoption, which is great. And that's a really big part of it, but also it is slow. That's the other part. It takes a long time. And so if we can make that more efficient, while increasing user adoption and increasing due diligence, that's key. And there's not many software categories out there that aren't making things more efficient. Like generally just putting software into things, the purpose of it is to make it more efficient. And so it's starting to change now. It's one of the last procurement dominoes to fall, but we are seeing a lot more investment in that area.
So the platform also enables democratization in a couple of ways, right? Because you get democratization inside your organization, right? I can invite a lot of people to contribute in very specific, very managed ways, so it doesn't again become bureaucratic. While at the same time, you get the democratization of a community. Is that correct?
I think there's more. There's even another one. So
sweet.
If we step back to the democratization piece inside the company. And we talked about this earlier before we started recording about how the loudest voice in the room can get things done. Right? So that's really the big problem with that is I can be the loudest person and I'll get what I want, versus I could be the smartest person but not say anything and not get anything. Like the right decision may be hidden behind somebody not wanting to stand up. So that ability to enable everybody to have a voice and a seat at the table when you're making the decisions, it's not just going to help everyone feel nice about a decision, but it's going to make the decision better because you're going to get better adoption throughout the company. We actually see an completely inverse correlation when you include people versus exclude them. If you're included in an RFP and you feel like you're being heard, you purposefully fight through bugs in software because you feel like the decision was for you. If you do not get included in an RFP or an evaluation, you end up finding bugs and saying, you see, I should have gone the other way. So the inclusion and the democratization there is really, really important. The ability to have access to not just generic RFP, like copy-paste RFP, but
Mm-hmm.
what sort of requirements does a manufacturing company of my size look at when they're looking at ERPs? It's really important, and we get that through these kind of platforms too, is understanding not just generically what does everybody think about this, but what do people within my specific business type and my peers think about this, which is really, really key. The other democratization piece is the vendors. So really where I got involved in this business was because I was responding to a lot of RFPs, and I've worked at both large companies where we had a whole team behind us, and we were always included in everyone's report really high up. And we ended up selling a bunch of stuff, but the platform wasn't that good. And I've worked at other companies where the software is amazing, but they didn't have the money for the sales and marketing and to invest in that. And so the sales was really hard. So great product, sales hard, not so good product, sales easy. And so the other piece is I think it democratizes on the vendor side and allows, firstly, them to get exposure, which is great for them, but also for the buyer to get exposure to certain companies that they wouldn't normally get access to.
Sure.
So you kind of have those three levels, I think, of democratization.
Yeah, like it's really neat to take a look at it from the kind of 360 perspective, right?
Yeah.
And provide help kind of throughout the flow. So for people watching this, who I'm sure we're really happy for the little side adventure we took into William Shatner, and we'll get back to side adventures here in a minute. What are some like tips that you would say, hey, like within your RFP process, here's some things you could do to improve it. Here's some kind of ways that you should be looking at this whole thing to kind of improve it and get beyond the feeling of this is more work than value.
So I think first that's a mindset shift that has to happen. It is more work. It is like there's no denying that to make a good decision, it takes a lot more work than a quick decision. And what we don't think about though is once you've got the decision, cool, I can move on. If it's the wrong decision, the amount of work it takes to make up for a bad decision is way more than it takes to do some RFP work. So that's the number one mindset shift is learn from the mistakes of others within your organization and other people. Speak to people who have worked through failed implementations and customizations and extra work and trying to get adoption. Speak to people that have been through that and would say, if I could just go back, I would have changed my decision, and realize that putting the work up front is important. So I think that's the number one, is just accept, okay, there's some work and good things come from doing more work. That being said, we can make the process more efficient, 100%. It's definitely do your research. Don't copy paste. Do your research. I think the number one thing is if you can not think about this as one document and you think about it as separate sections is going to help a lot. So if you think about, I don't know, an ERP, so many elements to it, right? So many elements. We'll take HRIS because that's like 20 different software types bundled into one thing, right? So think about your HRIS and think about, okay, payroll is one thing. And just think about what's important to payroll at your company. And that can be a set of questions that you go out and make sure that it's aligned. So instead of copying and pasting an HRIS RFP, get a few or use ChatGPT if you want, whatever you want, and then just get those payroll pieces. And they don't have to be massive, just a few that are important and relevant to your business, and then move on to the next section. If you break it down like that, and hopefully if you can get some feedback from vendors early, that's difficult. That's where the platforms come in. The ability to be anonymous and allow vendors to respond and answer questions and collaborate with you without getting sold to. That's where a platform will really help. But even if you just have a short list of these are my payroll must-haves, and then go out to the vendors and see which ones can do those pieces, and then move on to the next, you're going to have a lot more success than if you try and build like this giant HRIS RFP document and then ship it out. I think Kimmy Schmidt, I watched an episode of Kimmy Schmidt, and she said, do 1 minute at a time. Anyone can do anything for 1 minute. So if you've got to do something for an hour, just break it down into 60-minute pieces. And I think that's a big thing that people don't think about. It's just break it down, and it's actually not as big as you think.
Well, and I also think like we tend to do things in stages, and the stages tend to be fairly rigid, right? And so we've done all this architecture and workshop work, and then we go to do the RFP.
Right.
If we integrated the RFP process into our architecture work, our design work, our business analysis, our BPA, right, our business process automation or analysis that we do, right? Like if we integrate the RFP process into all of these stages, it also would stop being onerous, because at that point it's just data aggregation, not, ooh, crap, can I remember, like, does anyone remember what happened in that meeting that didn't get captured because we weren't thinking about it from this perspective, right?
Here that comes to the second piece, which is after you've written an RFP, right? So that's what can you do from scratch. But if your company has ever written one, that information should live somewhere and should be accessible to everyone else. And that's one of the big problems today that we have, is you do this big decision, maybe it lives in a Word doc somewhere on some drive somewhere that you can pull out, but it's not very reusable. And you can't section it out, take these pieces for this and these pieces for this. So the work after you've done it, making sure that there is an RFP process, but also that when someone in the company's done that, that information is stored somewhere that someone else can use and access.
Yeah, for sure.
The next one is really key. And that, I think, is something people have really overlooked. And it doesn't help that you use consultants. Not that the consultants are really important, by the way, as a part of making major decisions. You want to have experts around you, but when a third party is controlling the documentation of this, it can become a lot harder to own that and be able to reference it, right? It's out there and someone else has that. So that's I think a big piece is like owning that data and seeing that decision data on this stuff. It's not just useful for being better at the next RFP. It's useful when 6 months down the road, that integration doesn't work exactly as you thought it was. You can come back and say, well, apparently it should have done. So I'm not paying all this for extra development work. That's on you, right? So there's so many values to just storing that information and making it accessible that we just don't do today.
Yeah, that is one thing that I tried to do in prior lives. When I was responding to RFPs much more than I was building RFPs, I would take every RFP, I would break out every question, then I had a database of questions. Sure. So I could see, so I could always go back and look, okay, cool, I've already, like, I could let someone else start. Okay, we've already answered 3/4 of these questions, go find them. Right. And then it kind of became a bit of copy paste from our perspective as well. Right.
100%.
Some of that makes life easier. Some of that allows again for big mistakes to be made. Right.
You may
assume a question is the same, so you paste the answer in, only to find the question wasn't actually the same, but nobody knew how to look at it properly to recognize the question had a different intention.
That's 100%. There's human error across this because they're pretty big documents. There's a lot of questions going on. That's why I think RFP response tools came before RFP building tools.
For sure.
From a software perspective, RFP response automation has been around for a lot longer than RFP creation. Well, it depends what you talk about. I mean, if you sort of old school SAP had like an RFP creation tool, so that's kind of where we were at. But this idea of RFP automation for questions very much was on the response side first, and now procurement tech is starting to pick up the sort of build stuff because, I mean, it could be because there's more money in the sales organization, or there was. That could be part of it, but either way, I think that's having a database on both the buy and the sell side is really key.
Well, and I think until COVID, we really weren't paying much attention to our procurement processes in our organizations. You know what I mean? Like, we just kind of adopted what kind of everybody else did, which was also created by the people that were kind of the loudest voice. And if we went to a new org, we kind of drug stuff along with us, and no one really sat back and went, are we doing this intelligently? Then COVID happened. All of a sudden, everybody's dispersed, and I've got big decisions that have to be made and executed in 6 weeks. Right. And so these 9-month procurement processes very famously became 9-day procurement processes.
Sure.
Right.
I'm sure procurement loved that.
Yeah. Well, some of it has gone back, but I don't think the pendulum has swung quite as far back to 9 months. But I do think we're starting to shine a light on that, right? Certainly it's something that I hear within IT, like, why were we able to move so fast during COVID and now we're back to moving so slow? We can't move this slow. We have to speed it back up. And procurement, of course, fights it for all the reasons that they should. And at the same time, right, somewhere in the middle is probably the smart place to be. Like, we made a lot of mistakes when we went from 9 months to 9 days. At the same time, maybe 90 days is the right pace. 9 months was certainly not the right pace.
It's hard. I'd love to see the pendulum swing to the middle. It feels like this just, with tech adoption in general, it's one extreme to the other in a cycle. We go, there's a bunch of there's a new cool thing that's out. We all have to get the new cool thing. So we go and there's a bunch of startups and we buy a bunch of stuff and we all now have huge tech debt and like huge technology stack so broad. Okay, now we need consolidation. We've got too much shadow IT and we've got etc. So now let's consolidate it. And then we go consolidate it and we're on these one platform. Now we're tied to this one vendor and they're not innovating fast enough. And we need this new thing. How are you using it?
Model changes, right? Or whatever it is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 100%. So now we need to look at other things and go out for some more point solutions. And then we start building up point solutions and then we're back on it. So, and when we're in those consolidation cycles, procurement becomes slower and they are able to say, okay, well, let's be careful with every decision. And then when we are in the hype cycles, AI is a really good recent example. We go out and add a bunch of stuff that we didn't necessarily need quickly and procurement get upset. And then they'll give you an I told you so in 12 months.
Right.
So I hope it comes to the middle. It just feels, from my experience, and I haven't been doing this forever, right? I've been in technology sales for about 15 years. But it feels like even from my lifetime, it's been just one side to the other. So I'd love to see it spring to the middle, but I'm not quite sure I know how that happens. I mean, you must be doing similar things at GigaHome, analyzing. I bet these things come up, right? It's too much software bloat, and then consolidation, and then we need more innovation. Do you get the same sort of vibe there?
Oh God, yes.
Okay.
Right. And why does this thing exist? It's the same as this other thing, but you just changed 3 terms for marketing purposes. Like it's not actually a new thing.
It's a great one.
Yeah, but customers are buying it. That doesn't change what I said. We're back to that whole statistic about 70 percentile, right? Like,
yeah.
I understand you can get reinforced a variety of different ways. That doesn't make it right, nor does it make it true for the reason, right? I saw a neat statistic that I'm not going to be able to repeat properly, but it's something like 600 million people have 5G, so 5G is a big success. Something like that. Okay. How many of those people actively chose 5G versus how many of those people passively got 5G? Right?
Yeah.
Like every current mobile handset is a 5G handset for a 5G network does not mean 5G is a rousing success. It just
everybody's
means
got that YouTube album.
Right.
Right.
They
love that YouTube album.
Best-selling album of all time. No, it's not. It was the best provided album of all time. It's the best licensed album of all time, but no one paid for the album.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of those things that we really that we also kind of need to look at. Right? Does this work because it provides value, or does this work because people passively make a decision? And shadow IT is a big piece of that, and shelfware is a big piece of that. Years and years and years ago, I bought a brand new product from a vendor that was ridiculously cheaply priced because it was a hell of a promotion. I didn't buy it for the platform. The platform stayed unplugged. It was a hardware platform. I bought it because the storage was the cheapest storage anyone was offering by a huge margin. So I plugged the storage in and went to work, and the platform stayed unplugged because the vendor didn't even know what the platform did. Not really. Right. And it was, I don't know, 3 years of conversation with them before I went, wait a minute, this is that thing that I've had collecting dust for 3 years. Like I'm gonna go plug that thing back in tomorrow. Show up, provision it. Let's go.
Did you get the platform? Did you start using it?
I did, and I became their top like innovation customer on the platform. I pushed the limits of the platform more than anybody else, but it took 3 years of shelfware before I realized what the heck that thing actually did and what value it could have for me.
This is a go-to-market strategy. I like shout out to all the startup founders out there. Go-to-market strategy: build something that's got incredibly cheap storage, do it for 3 years of shelfware, and eventually they'll buy your product.
Right. It's not a marketing strategy I would suggest.
No.
Right. I
mean, it's one data point. Good point.
Right. Well, not only that, but it seems like it'd be really hard to be successful. Right.
Probably 5 years ago, you'd be fine.
As a lost leader to promote a platform that the customer doesn't understand and your sales team doesn't understand, so you can eventually reach an inflection point where both those things change.
I think now in today's current economic climate and capital markets, 4 years ago, you could have gone to like Series C on that. Look at all this usage.
That's true. We could have. Yeah, during 2020, you probably could have. It's true. And you probably could have unicorned.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Decacorn, mate. Decacorn with that. It's great. Look at all this storage.
Right. We're making sales
great.
left and right.
Yeah.
Fastest growing storage vendor in the world.
No idea what platform we're going to do. No idea yet.
Right.
Who needs that?
I mean, we've got some there. Yeah, there's a platform installed. Nobody uses it, but it's okay. We're still getting units.
Yeah.
Right. Subscriber base is still growing by 300% every quarter. It's great.
That's all you need on the day. I'll just open with that slide, close with a thank you. Good to go.
Right. It's a bidding war. We're getting funding like crazy.
Yeah. Okay, we need a time machine to do that. Let's do next hype cycle. That's the plan.
So it's like the Treasury. For a little while, the Mint. Sorry, for a little while, the U.S. Mint would sell you U.S. coins at a certain quantity, like $100 or something. They would you could put it on your credit card, and they would give you free shipping. So you'd buy $100 for $100 with free shipping, and then use the $100 to pay off the credit card balance, collecting the credit card points.
Brilliant,
right? So you could. Yeah. It was like the best business model for building points that anyone had ever created. Of course, that changed now because the U.S. Mint went, why are we losing so much damn money on this? Why did we see such a huge spike? Oh, because there's 27 websites that now advertise, hey, like you can build credit, you can build points, you can get, all the top tier point levels, membership levels at all these different places. Just open a credit card, order coins from the U.S. Mint, deposit the coins, pay off the credit card every month. You'd never carry a balance, pay no interest, and it was all free.
When was this?
10 years ago, maybe.
That's so cool. I love it.
Isn't it crazy?
I've been here for a lot of my professional career in North America, and but I don't think it's quite the same back home. The points over here, points and status over here, and point redemption is just next level. It's so good. I've been hooked on it. Marriott's my hotel, and I'm obsessed. I never thought I'd care about credit card points. If I'd known about this 10 years ago, I'd be all over it.
I hit titanium in March. It's something I care a lot about.
Good lad. Well done.
It actually, so funny story about status. And look, I want to first acknowledge status is a first world problem for sure.
Yes.
Right. And it is the reward I get for being a road warrior.
Yeah.
Right. Like I spend a lot of time away from my family. I get status. Allows me to board a plane early, get upgrades, whatever. I get that people have all kinds of feelings about that, but the reality is, I miss 200 days at home a year. Right.
I think the worst part of that is it's tough. Being on the road is tough. And again, it is a first world problem for sure, but it isn't easy. And the worst thing is when people are like, oh, all this travel must be so great. It's like, well, it's not really. I mean, it's not like I'm going to Kenya or like Fiji.
Sure.
Sure. I like Oklahoma
There's only
City.
so many times I can see Minneapolis, St. Paul. There's only so many hotels I can stay at in Vegas.
Yeah.
Right. Like I don't get to necessarily choose the destinations. And, I've been to 31 countries. Thailand's not one of them. Vietnam's not one of them. Right. I'd like to change that. Bali. I've not been to Bali. I've not been to the Dominican Republic. These are great places to travel for vacation. I don't get to go there.
Right. How many times have you been to St. Louis?
Right. I've been to St. Louis quite a few times.
Yeah. It's great.
I see a lot of Orlando. Right.
Yeah,
like
any travel. I've covered Orlando.
Right. Thoroughly.
Yeah.
Thoroughly. Anyone wants a restaurant recommendation to Orlando or Las Vegas or Minneapolis, St. Paul or Chicago? I got your hookup.
Yeah.
Right. So I traveled to France, to Paris for the first time, took my wife with me, went to KubeCon in Europe. And then we stayed and we went to the two Disney parks for Euro Disney. And then there's two. They're tiny.
I went a lot as a kid.
Oh yeah, sure. It's close. Right. And say what?
Not too far. It's the Channel Tunnel. If it was there, we had the ferry. We used to take the ferry over.
Right. So we then headed back to Paris for our last 2 nights before the flight, and I had booked a hotel as close as I could get to the Eiffel Tower.
Okay.
Right. Figuring this would be a nice little thing for my wife. Only I screwed up. And I got kind of impatient when I booked the hotel. And I thought I prepaid the room, prepaid the nights. And I thought I booked 2 twin beds because that's what the reservation said. 2 twin beds at the most romantic hotel of our trip. So just think about that for a moment. It's my wife's first international trip. She's got a lot of excitement. I've been telling her about the Eiffel Tower Hotel. I'm looking at this reservation going, oh, crap. So we roll up to the hotel, and it's kind of late because Euro Disney's not in Paris. It's an hour and a half drive, right? So we get in, kind of walk into the hotel, and I'm like, hey, I think I screwed up the reservation. Please tell me we don't have a 2 twin bed room. And they go, oh, no, sir. No, you didn't book a 2 twin bed. And no, you've got an upgrade. And they laughed when they said it. And Parisians, they're not into entertaining you at all, right? They laughter's not their thing. They'll laugh at you, but they'll not laugh for you.
Sure, or with you.
Right? So the laugh normally would have been, oh, we're in the basement. But this was like a happy laugh. Like, oh, I can't believe somebody upgraded you this way. This is going to be good. We've upgraded you to the Eiffel Suite. Because I had the most status of anybody staying in the hotel for those 2 nights. So we go upstairs and you open the 4 foot by 4 foot picture window, and it is just tower. There's nothing blocking your view of the tower.
That's great.
Right. So status definitely has a benefit for that sort of thing.
I'm all hotel status as well. I think a lot of people focus so much on the plane status, but if you can get the status for hotels, the upgrades are so awesome. So awesome. I love it.
I don't enjoy the hotel stuff as much. I like the late checkout. That's the big thing I like. And then the M Club, right? Being able to, especially the good M Clubs where they're 24 hours, because being able to go get a coffee or a water or a soda 24 hours a day is just, that rocks when it's $4 a bottle of water,
It's a big feature, mate. It's a big feature. Have you been to many of the other Eiffel Towers around America?
Only the one in Las Vegas.
That's obviously that's a big one, but there's Paris, Texas has got one. Paris, where was I? I was at one recently. I got a picture of me out. It's like Paris, Kentucky, maybe somewhere around there. Wow. I'll send you a couple of Paris. I think there's something like 12 Eiffel Towers in America or something.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, so you should check a few of them off. That's like how many of these can I check off?
Right. Well, let's be honest. If you go to Paris, Texas to see the Eiffel Tower, you need a hobby.
Well, maybe your hobby is Eiffel Tower watching. What's wrong with that?
But Paris, Texas is not a great travel destination.
Sure. Unless
I hope you ended up like you were in Paris, Texas and went, hey, there's an Eiffel Tower here. I'm going to go see it. Not, I went out on my way to see the Eiffel Tower in Paris, Texas.
Oh, so my wife, I said, hey, we're going to Paris, Texas.
Right.
No, it was on a road trip through.
Oh, yeah.
It was there. But I just love it. I think it's an incredibly amazing American feat to have that many Eiffel Towers.
It is very American. Like, we can't build one as tall, but we're going to build a lot of them.
Yeah. I'm surprised there isn't one as tall, to be honest. I'm surprised there isn't, like...
Well, we don't know how to do it.
Build Eiffel Towers?
To that size.
Oh, like humanity doesn't? Or
Correct. The knowledge of how to do that is currently lost. I don't know that it will be forever. Right, with some of the impressive like drones with 3D scanners, like I think we'll probably be pretty close to putting some of that stuff back together. But we don't know how to recreate the Eiffel Tower from an engineering standpoint.
Maybe it's just one of those things people haven't really invested too much time in because there's one already. Do we need to find it out?
A bit of work in trying to redo the engineering and the math associated with it, right? Because it's not only a feat of engineering, right? It's a feat of material design.
But this is the thing. Like, do we need another? Maybe the reason we haven't invested in figuring it out is because,
as an academic exercise for engineering students, I can see the value. I'm going to actually rebuild this thing somewhere else. I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah.
Right.
I won't be investing, but I appreciate.
Sure. Yeah.
It sounds interesting. That's great. So we've got the Eiffel Tower, the pyramids. What else do we not know? How it's built. Bellagio fountain?
I don't know.
How was the Bellagio fountain built? That's America's wonder of the world, surely. One of them.
That's true. Bellagio fountains are pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's great.
Right. Well, I'll leave you with one final kind of history buff piece. Do you know what stopped the Mongol invasion of Europe?
I could have a guess, but I'm not going to go for it.
It was Venice.
Can swim?
Well, yeah, they're all horse based.
On horse, yeah.
So they had no idea what to do about a canal, like a place that had water as streets, and they couldn't leave an enemy behind them. They were not effective at taking over Venice, and they couldn't leave an enemy behind them. So they got kind of that far, pissed around a bit, and of course they have supply chain issues because they're so far from home.
Sure.
And that stalled them out so much that they ended up kind of stopping there and retreating.
They started building an RFP to figure out how do they get across. We need to find a vendor to get across this thing.
That's true.
But
right?
the bureaucracy
was no consultant company that had done it before. That was the problem, right? No one had done it before, so there was no consultant. There were no experts.
It's no crossing Venice consultant. This ridiculous city had a purpose. I we've got to wrap up on time. Do you ever play the game The Sims?
Of course.
Oh, one of my favorite. I don't want to man on computer games, but one of my favorite things I did when I was young on computers was I must have been inspired by Venice, and I like swimming. I made a Sims house that was all pool. So every room, you had to swim to every other room. And they were just knackered. Like they were so tired all the time. They couldn't work. They couldn't do anything because you were just tired. It's like, this pool house idea is not going to work in the real world.
Look, I can't be on this Zoom call. I got a dog paddle the whole time. Can we make it 10 minutes? I can do 10 minutes.
Yeah,
right? Exactly. Your legs would be like this big around too. Right?
Yeah,
little tiny upper bodies, but huge legs.
Huge, yeah. Cyclists. Yeah.
All right, Chris. So as we close out here, how can people get a hold of you? Like, what are you up to? Where are you going to be? Where can they find you?
Sure thing. So LinkedIn's where I'm most active. So it's just LinkedIn/Herd Chris. Chris Herd was taken, unfortunately. Olive.app is our website at olive.app. You can check out there and you can always inquire about the business. And where am I going to be? We're doing a talk on our report. We just launched a data report from over 700 RFPs. So I'll actually be doing a webinar on that next week. And I can share some details with you, Howard, but that will be available on the website as well. So olive.app, you'll find that webinar.
Fantastic. Well, as soon as the webinar gets published, send it our way. We'll do a little write up and link to it. That'll be a lot of fun. I'm really interested to see the insights from the 700 RFPs. And I'm actually, we had planned to get to it, but I'm sorry we didn't get to it. But this has been a really lovely conversation. Thanks for sticking around as we went over time a little bit. I always have a ton of fun talking to you. So this has been another episode of Discovering Disruptions in Tech. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment. And if you'd like to be on or if you'd like a topic covered, please reach out. You can also find me on LinkedIn, LinkedIn/Howard Holton. Thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful